walk for about 30 minutes around the neighborhood, around this, that, and the other, and visit with them, and then you go to the other. Well, it wasn't long till I got Jean signed up on all. I had every prom with her, you know, and I wasn't going to let anybody else so I could have any prom.
I've never heard of that.
Well, that was
parents arrange it, you would say?
No, I don't, but it was well chaperoned and all that sort of thing, but it really gave the kids a chance to get out from the parents, you know, for a little while. Now, you're supposed to come back pretty soon.
That's a good idea.
But one thing led to another, and all of a sudden, you know, I took her to something, and
that's about 5th grade. That's about 11 years old, about 5th grade.
Something like
so
that.
from 5th
something like
grade
that.
on.
See, I didn't go to Cloverdale School, so I didn't know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she went. Yeah, she went to Bellinger Hill.
Bellinger Hill, then. Okay.
You finally went to Cloverdale, didn't you?
Junior high school.
Oh, junior high school.
So 6th or 7th grade. I guess they would have had the 7th grade. You would have moved over. Well, that wasn't too long after you saw her in the Chinaberry trees.
Now we did not solidly go together from then until we got married about at age 20. It was probably the majority of the time.
Right.
Every once in a while, I went over to Europe defending my country, and one of my sisters writes me that I've seen Gene McCord riding down Fairview Avenue in a convertible.
We don't forget.
So I get home. We've been writing, of course, all these letters and all, and I was coming home at a certain time. And she's in college in Virginia. So I get off the ship, spend my last few bucks on a long-distance call, which was expensive in those days, and got on the phone. I am home, said, "Oh, are you home?" And I found out later that the boy she'd been riding up and down Fairview with was in the living room with her. As I spoke, she was at home. I don't think she was at college that particular case. So I got home and I gave her a ring, and I thought she understood the implications of the ring.
Go into all this.
But one night, she kind of challenged me. Something I didn't want to do or wanted to do. I shouldn't want talking to him anymore.
Did she take the ring?
Yeah, and everything I'd given her for 8 years, it took boxes. And we were busted up for quite some time.
I mean, she took it and she gave it back.
Yeah, I mean, she didn't give it back to me. I mean, she threw it at me, as I recall. Then the next morning she called. I think she wanted to make up.
I want to make sure I get. Now, give me the general age we're talking. What are we talking
I'm 20 now. By now, I've been in Europe and back. I'm in
He has so fouled up this story.
You've got to have your chance down the road.
This is your
version.
This is pretty close to how it happened too. We went through then a good long period of.
Now, hold on a second.
I'm over there. We really split up for 6, 8 months. I was at Huntington College, having the time of my life as a returning veteran. Beautiful women everywhere.
And she was not at Huntington?
No, she was at home at that time. She had graduated from junior college. She was back home working for a doctor, I think is what she was doing.
But we're not talking about more than a mile or two apart.
No, we just as close as we've ever been. I lived on this side of the park. She lived right on this side.
Okay.
But we were not having any contact. So I got kind of sweet on one of those pretty girls out there. And she wanted to talk about getting married. And then she wanted to take me home to Atlanta with her to meet her family.
Oh, serious.
Serious. And it was beginning to get serious. And she wanted to have a kindergarten, and she wanted, in my garage behind my mother and daddy's house, had a second store, kind of a playroom thing. And we talked about we were going to convert that into kindergarten, and she was going to have a kindergarten up there. Well, about that time, she hears about all this. I didn't know it, but we had a mutual friend, and I said, Rosie, I'm about to get in deeper than I can get out of. If she's got any inkling of interest in me whatsoever, now is the time for her to say something.
All of your destiny turned on that point there.
So one night, I'm at the Huntington Library studying, and the phone rings, and they page me, come get me. And she's on the other phone. You need a ride home? It was kind of raining out there. Yeah. uh, I said, I got to study till 10 o'clock or something like that. He said, well, I'll pick you up. Okay. So she picked me up. And we went over to a hamburger stand that used to be called Sully's. It was down on Decatur Street, and that's where all the kids went. We went all the time. Mm-hmm. And we got us some hot chocolate. And forgot to tell this part of the story. She asked her daddy after she called me and I had accepted the ride. Said, Daddy, can I borrow the car? What do you want it for? Yeah, Jimmy needs a ride back from the library. All of a sudden, I needed a ride back from the library. He said, well, see, he liked me a lot. He thinks he was happy. He said, oh, you got to go ahead and take the car.
But she got your yes before she even had a car.
Yeah, but he throws other keys. She goes and gets in the car, slams it into reverse, and goes through the door. The door was pulled down. True story.
The door of the house?
The garage. The garage.
Oh,
it was pulled down, and she went into reverse.
Oh, no. Well, a stick shift kind? Oh, my word.
But she knew where all the gears were. She knew where all the gears were.
Well, there was a lot of emotion going on at that
That's
point.
right.
That.
And I think on that very night, I said, now, Jean, you know I love you. I've always loved you. But I'm tired of fooling around. Eh? You want to go or you don't want to go? Do you let me know? We were married about 2 months later. We've been married over 50 years now. So. And I never did give her a ring back.
Well, the car still, she didn't damage it enough where it didn't run. I mean, she got...
Well, I can't answer that. I don't really know.
You picked him up, though.
Damaged the door.
Yeah, he damaged the door. Anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you just keep going?
Yeah.
No, you didn't?
But fortunately, as I said, and this is the truth, her daddy liked me.
Yeah.
And he got a kick out of this rather than getting mad about it, which he certainly could have done. But he took great delight in telling this story.
Oh, I bet that does make a...
Of how she charged out the door. And I'm glad she did.
Oh, that's a great
But that's
story.
the way it began. And you know she hadn't said a word that I'm lying because every word I've told you is absolute truth.
All right. Well, she's wanted to change a few details, but maybe
the
gist of it sounds like it's on target. Well, I want to, and that was, what year was it?
1947.
You got married in 1947. I want to try to do two things before we finish. What time range we at? All right, I want to do two things before we got still about 10 minutes.
What time is supper served?
Yeah. All right. Take me through, and I may stop you a little on this, but through the highlights of career from the marriage on till now. Start with that, and then I'll go from there.
Well, I really had 3 careers. Two for sure, and now I'm nearly about a third one. I worked for 20 years. When I was going to college, I thought I was going to work for my daddy. That'd always been my plan. That's what we'd always talked about. And when I graduated, I got a good job waiting for me there. I went and sat down with my daddy. My dad and I were best of friends, always. And he told me what he was planning to pay me. I said, Daddy, I can't live on that. I got a wife, and by that time I had 2 children, I think. I said, I can't live on that. He said, well, that's all we can pay. I said, well, I got to have more money. So I then began to look around, and I gravitated into the insurance business and had some help from my daddy finding a place where somebody could use me or something like that. And we worked for several years, strictly on commission, starving to death. We were just laughing about it this afternoon. Her daddy would bring us eggs by lots, and we ate lots of eggs. And we went over to Mama's house every Sunday night and ate. And I think that's the only way we got by. Those were tough years, they really were. But good years, good years, because everybody else we knew was poor, and we were all working to get ahead. But I ended up, that man died, I bought his agency over a period of time. Then I sold out to another fellow, Ed Watts, that we were talking about a little while ago, and we formed an insurance agency down there. And I ran that for, I total about 20 years that I spent in the insurance business, and I was doing well in it by that time. My father, in the meantime, his business had done fairly well, but his health was breaking. And my mother said, would you mind taking over your daddy's business? I was the only one of the children that had any business experience or anything like that. And, well, I don't know, Mom, I got awful good business of my own. And, but I'll think about it. And so I went down and talked to Mr. Ed Watts. And I said, Ed, I got a real problem. My dad's got a business over here. It's a pretty good business. I'm in business with you right here. I need to be looking after his business. I need to be looking after both these businesses. Is there any way we could work something out like that? And he came up with I was real active in civic work, Red Cross, anything you can name I was in, because that was contacts for the insurance business and so forth. He said, well, you give up all your outside activities and it'd be fine with me if you want to just work the insurance business and the oil business. Well, that's the only deal on the table. I had to take it, and I got out of the YMCA board and all kind of things like that I hated to do. That lasted for 4 or 5 years, I guess. I was working nearly about all my life. I've had 2 jobs all the time. I've always had 2 sources of income some way. But during that time, the insurance business was prospering and the oil business was prospering. Then the day comes when the Quaker State Oil Refining Corporation, who we mainly distributed at that time.
This is late 60s.
Yeah.
We're talking about generally...
Early 60s. Yeah, late 60s. I guess it was late 60s.
All right, keep going.
And they sent their Southeast representative in here, and we had a nice up, and they said, no, you know, we've gone along with this way of operating for a good long while, but said, really, we'd like to be doing business with a man that owns a distributorship. Realize your daddy can't do that now. And it's time has come for you to fish or cut bait, is what it amounted to. Well, I had awful good fish on this line, and I had 2 boys in college, and that's the biggest decision I reckon I ever had to make. I said, well, I'm just going to get out of the insurance business. Yeah? Going full-time into the oil business. It's a family business. I just don't want to see it disappear, and I don't want to see y'all give it to somebody else. Well, that shocked them, because they had expected, they knew I had a successful insurance business, and they had expected me just to get out. I wouldn't be surprised if they had somebody waiting over here with the money to come in. But that began our second career, which we spent about 20 years in. And Jean hated that when I did that, because it took a lot of traveling. We had a lot of meetings. She wasn't interested in meeting any of these other folks. These was a whole new bunch of folks.
And covered a lot of territory.
Covered a lot of territory. But she went along for a couple of meetings, and we made the closest friends of our life out of Quaker State distributors all the way from Washington, D.C. to Houston, Texas, and Miami. And we're still in contact with them, and we still visit with them some of them from time to time. And we got our Montgomery friends. Of course, they're friends in a very special way, but our Quaker State friends, we got to know them, I guess, better than anybody we knew. Now, the reason I got in this small group, we were not a big distributorship, but we ranked number 5 in the country on our market penetration. That's gallons per car sold in your territory. And so by having that distinction, I got invited into this group of 10, I think it started out. 10 distributors out of 300 that accounted for more than 25% of the total business that Quaker State did in the country. So they really listened to us, and we met every 6 months for 5, 6, 7 years, didn't we? And we went all the way from Sawgrass to what was the most expensive hotel we ever stayed in? Watergate.
So you got to see places to go do things you never got to do.
And in fact, we had them all to Montgomery one time, and we entertained them on the riverboat and this, that, and the other. They had a real good time. But Watergate, we figured, was the most expensive place we had ever heard of, except intensive care. And indeed it was. But Quaker State set us up the last night we were there, set us all up, to dinner at John Louis. But you may not have ever heard of John Louis. But at that time, it was the most expensive restaurant in America.
Is that right?
And we had a meal like you would not believe.
You never forget that.
And we just never forget that.
You know the general range of the bill, what it
Yeah,
came.
well, I don't know, well over $100, I'm sure, and that was those times,
Oh,
which would be a lot more than that now. But it was a big bill.
Oh, yeah.
We wasn't allowed to just order anything we wanted to. They had the meal selected that we got, you know. But I just heard after that a couple of the boys at Quaker State that set that up really got reamed out about the cost of that thing.
Never again. No.
And that's the last time we ever met there.
Never again. All right, so then you went from that being the second career.
In 1987, I sold insurance. The oil business. The oil shortage got on us. The government regulation was choking us to death. And I had an offer, and I sold it. And I retired for 6 months. Absolutely retired. Worked in my yard every day. Had the prettiest yard on Boxwood. But I was miserable. And one day I ran into Bill Pearson. We ate lunch together from time to time over the years. And he was with P.H.&J Architects, which was Pearson, Humphreys, and Jones. He was a senior principal. We were talking about computers because we had computerized the oil company, and I told him about that. And they had followed us. A couple of years later, they began to computerize the architecture firm. But the biggest piece of software they had never been able to work. And he just, why don't you come down there and work on it, see if you can make this stuff work. Now, I don't want to work much, Just come down and work whatever you want to work. And I spent a year, I guess, doing nothing but being holed up with this software because I had to learn the architecture business first, which I knew nothing about, all the terminology, all that stuff, then try to make the system work to keep up the time and all the way they wanted it to do. One day it worked. And about that time, I said, why don't you work, you don't need to work 3 or 4 hours a day, why don't you work 7 or 8 hours a day? And I did that. Then the business manager quit suddenly. Well, I didn't want to be business manager of that. I said, well, I'll help y'all out for a while. And that ended when I had my stroke. I was business manager until I had my stroke. And that was a full-time, more than a full-time job, about a 60-hour-a-week job, kind of a job. And I work now about 20 hours a week as a hired gun. I'm not an employee anymore. I work at my own leisure and when I want to and what I want to. They just tell me what they want.
What they need.
It's mostly financial stuff. I know nothing about architecture. I don't have anything to do with architecture.
Right.
But I do know about running the business. And every business basically is the same. You got money coming in, you got money going out. Mm-hmm. Hopefully you hang on to a little bit of it. Mm-hmm. And that's what we spend most of our time.
You're doing that as we speak.
I still do that, yeah.
Okay. I know Lake Martin has been a significant part of your history. Tell me a little bit about how that whole Lake Martin phenomenon happened.
We lived across the street from a couple that came from Ellick City, Alabama. And one day they came over and told us about having gone to Lake Martin and what a great time they had up there and how many people were going to the beach. Well, Gene and I really had never even thought about Lake Martin. We used to fish at Lake Jordan. Lake Martin was too far to go, and there wasn't anything up there. It was all wilderness. But we went up and had a wonderful time on the public beach up there, with the result that we started taking our whole family up there. When I say whole family, I mean my mother and daddy and my grandparents and all the children, and we'd go up there and spend a day and had a wonderful time for several years.
Give me about what year?
Oh, gosh, it was in the early 50s, I would say. Isn't that right, honey? Yeah.
And Kalijah actually had a little beach there.
Well, it wasn't it was on the other side of the bridge from Kalijah. But there was a public beach there at that time that was sandy all the way around, and they had as many as 10,000 people there on Sundays sometimes. One day we were over at Kalijah, and I ran into Dr. Searcy, who'd been president of Huntington College, who was president of Huntington College, and had been there when I attended Huntington College. Dr. Searcy and I had gotten to be great friends when I was a student there. And he mentioned to me he had a Russell cabin. Well, what's a Russell cabin? I'd never heard of a Russell cabin. He said, well, it's a cabin Mr. Tom Russell built, and he just doesn't charge you any rent at all. And he's trying to get some folks to move to the lake. Well, how much you pay for it? Well, he was paying $30 a month or something like that. I said, yeah, that sounds good to me. I didn't have $30. I couldn't have had $30 if I'd had to. But he said, y'all ought to come up here. Well, how do we get up here, doctor? He said, well, I know they got a waiting list, but I'll call and get you on the waiting list. Okay, fine. I didn't give any more thought to it. I thought that's the last we'd ever hear. Well, another month or two goes by. We're running Dr. Cersei again at the lake. He said, well, have they called you from the Russell? No, I hadn't heard from them. And it made him mad. Well, then the very next day, they did call us, and we had advanced all the way to the top of the list somehow.
A little pull.
A little pull, and which I've had all my life and been willing to use. And they wanted us to come to the lake. They had 3 lots that we could pick one out. So we did, and they asked us how we wanted it built and so forth. And so I pointed across the slough, and I said, well, we'd kind of like to look at that cabin over there. And that was the Coleman Beale's cabin. He'd had it a month or so at that time. We went over there, and this is perfect. It had 3 bedrooms and 2 baths, and nothing elaborate. It was just a cabin. That's all it was. I said, could you build one just like this, but turn it the other way? So we were sitting here, and we kind of opposite from each other. Yes, we could do that. How much it going to cost? Well, I don't know. We charge 10% of whatever it cost us to build, 10% a year. So they went on and built it.
And you're talking to who?
I'm talking to Mr. Russell's representative.
He's got a representative.
Yeah, he's got a representative.
All right, go ahead.
Can't remember what his name was right now. Nice fellow. Well, they built it. Took them several months to build it. Gene went to the lake every day, I think, and our gasoline bill was so horrendous that we were still worrying about that thing. But we did get it built. And so now it comes time to settle up. How much? Well, it's going to be $42 a month. So I never did let them see me sweat. Well, thinking to myself, where am I going to come up with $42 a month? So on the way home, I pondered this. I can't let this thing get away from me. This is too good a deal. But I got to figure out a way to finance it. So I had 4 brothers and sisters, 5 including me. We finally talked each of them into putting in $10 a month. And we had a little family partnership up there. Everything was always in my name, though, and I was responsible for the bill and also responsible for collecting the $10 a month from each one of them, which was a real big we had lots of hard times over that.
Your life as a collection agent.
That's right. But gradually, my brothers and sisters decided they no longer wanted to participate. And over a long period of years, we ended up with being the only one in that cabin. By that time, rent had gone to $82 a month, something like that. And about that time, Mr. Russell died. Russell Lands took over. They wanted to build big homes on our property. So they gave us a chance to buy it for $85,000 for 1/3 of my lot. And then we were going to tear the house down and build several $100,000 home there to meet that specification. Gene and I decided that was a little rich for our blood, and so we moved to Coosa County then on up the lake where we've been about 10 years now. We have a deeded lot and it belongs to us and everything. But
so this was all about 87 that they switched over.
Yeah, somewhere like that.
And they went from 40. You started at $42 a month and went to what?
80. It was 80 something when 81. Gene says when we left.
$81 a month. So in about 30 years, you went up $40 or so.
But over the years, you would come up with questions. I wonder if we can do this. I wonder if we can do that. There wasn't anything in writing. All we ever had was a handshake that we were going to behave ourselves first. If we didn't, Russell would kick us out. And second, that we were going to take reasonably good care of his cabin. But if it needed painting on the outside, new roof, new steps, all you had to do was call them, pump, Russell had people took care of those. It's a good deal, a real good deal.
All right, in the 40 years, or more than 40 years there, you had a lot of memories, but I know you had one dramatic memory. Tell me a little bit about that memory.
Well, we didn't used to have a telephone, anything like that at the lake, and you went kind of native when you got up there. And of course, I've always liked to go barefoot, still do. But I went out one morning. We didn't have a pier at that time. We had managed to finally buy us a little aluminum john boat, and we had a little 9-point-something horsepower motor that we used to go fishing with. And I would just pull it up on the shore. We were on a gently sloping shore there. Mm-hmm. One morning I went out. I was going to the point to troll a little bit, and I didn't have any shoes on. And I approached the front of the boat, and I, of course, put my foot under the boat, started to pick the boat up, and it felt a little squishy. So I said, well, I better back out of this situation easy, but as fast as I can. And I did, and there was a gigantic copperhead under that boat. Never will forget the feeling.
Did you actually step on him?
I stepped on him, yeah, I guarantee you.
And he didn't strike?
He couldn't strike. He was scrunched under the boat, and it was just the boat and him and my foot all come together out there. But he never had a chance to strike. And when I finally moved away and pushed the boat, he went on into the water, and that was the last there was of that. So.
Well, that was a close moment with death. I know you had, though, another experience, kind of like your close death experience while you're up there. Tell me a little bit about the night, so to speak.
Well, 1987, I sold my business, Upchurch Oil and Supply Company, and I retired. And for 6 months, I was totally retired. And I looked after my yard every morning, get up there and pick up the leaves one by one, or whatever it took. Tried to take 3 or 4 hours to do it anyway. And we had a pretty yard on boxwood. But a good friend of mine, Bill Pearson, and I had eaten lunch together for many years, at least once a week, and sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. And he was at P.H.&J Architects. In the meantime, we had put computers in at Upchurch Oil, and P.H.&J was just putting computers in. And he was asking me a lot of questions about it. And then finally one day he said, why don't you come and say, we've got a software program down here that we paid a lot of money for. We can't make it work. Suppose you come down here and try. So we negotiated a little bit, and I finally agreed to work 20 hours a week or something like that, up to that. And a year and a half later, I made the program work, but it took me a long time, but nobody ever asked me a question about it. I simply went when I wanted to. I shut myself off in a little office, and I did every kind of experiment that you can imagine on that program till I finally understood it backwards and forwards. At about that time, they hired me full-time. I don't know, I should have had more sense probably, but I went full-time. Full-time meant about 80 hours a week. One Friday, I got to the office, and I didn't feel very good, which is very unusual for me. By noontime, I just said, I don't know what's the matter with me, but I got to get out of here. So, I always went when I didn't feel good, was to the lake. I said, let me get in my boat, let me ride, and everything will be all right. Mm-hmm. Well, went up there. We never did get the boat out. I just didn't feel like it. And Gene and I ended up going to bed early, 9:30, 10 o'clock, something like that. About 3 o'clock, I waked up and my mattress was spinning. And I knew it wasn't spinning. My mind was telling me, this can't possibly be spinning. But I was holding on to it like this because it had every appearance of spinning, every feel of spinning. So I finally got Gene up. I had to shake a number of times. And I said, honey, I think I'm sick. She said, well, what's the matter with you? I think I've had a stroke. And I don't know why I thought that, but I just came up with that. She was like a general. We were up that was in early April, I think it was. Nobody else at the lake, nobody around us anywhere. She calls Elliott City for an ambulance, and she gets to run around there first because they didn't want to recommend an ambulance service to her. They had to say, she finally used some very strong language, And it wasn't long till the little ambulance was headed to the lake. She turned on all the spotlights, all the lights in our house, and they found their way there pretty fast.
You're conscious the whole time?
I'm conscious the whole time. I'm sick, but I'm conscious. And then they took me to Ellick City. We called Dr. Bill Crum. He said, get him to University of Alabama in Birmingham summer. We called them, told them to send their helicopter down to get me. They called back in a little while, and they couldn't do it. It was a stormy night, and one of the worst nights you can imagine. So we just can't do that. So a little bit more discussion. They decided to send an ambulance, a fully staffed ambulance, which I didn't know all the negotiating was going on about, but I knew something was going on. But when they finally got there, it was a great, big, broad, the biggest, widest ambulance I'd ever seen. It had a doctor. It had 1 or 2 nurses, plus the driver, all the equipment you can imagine, and they took off like a scalded dog to Birmingham. Now, I'm conscious all this time, but I'm thinking, this may be my last night on earth. I just don't know. Jean was behind the ambulance in the car trying to keep up with them because she didn't know where they were going in Birmingham, and that's a story all its own.
And this is all... What are we talking about? Morning?
Talking about 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning.
This is still about 4 o'clock at this point.
So we got to Birmingham, and make a long story short, they gave me every test known to man, and some that they hadn't even invented yet. And they came back and, like kicking a man when he was down, said, "We found colon cancer, and we need to operate on it right away. So we'll schedule you for tomorrow." I said, "Well, oh, wait a minute. I'm going home. If I got to have surgery, I'm going home." I still had enough. Gene said that, and I kind of mumbled. I couldn't talk very well.
You don't know the doctor. I mean, you just met this doctor?
Yeah, I didn't know a doctor, and I had friends in Montgomery who were surgeons, right. And one particular was Dr. Jack Till. I've known Jack Till a long time. I think if anybody's going to cut on me, it's going to be Jack Till. Well, they didn't like it very much, but they did finally release me 2 or 3 days later. Sally came up in the car and picked me up and brought me back home, and early the next morning we found Jack Till was sick and I was. And he had retired months before. So we ended up with a brand new doctor that I've still got, Dr. Duncan McRae, who was one of those fellows at the instant I met him. I had total trust in him. And so I ended up having my colon removed, most of it, and then I had to start taking chemotherapy for about a year. All this time I'm trying to get over my stroke.
I was going to say, none of this has anything to do with the
stroke. No, none of it had anything to do with it. And I say right now, looking back, all I ever remember is my stroke and what my stroke has done to me, and I forget I've had colon cancer. That just hadn't mattered to very much.
Surgery for colon cancer. But they were able to get you strong enough to have the colon cancer, or just did it anyway?
They did it anyway.
Yeah.
They did it anyway. Actually, the anesthesiologist did not want to put me out. And Dr. McRae just, I don't know what he said to him, what he threatened him with, but they finally did. They called my 2 boys in. I don't think the girls were in on this, but said, you know, your daddy may die. We may never wake up from anesthesia, but he's going to die anyway. I was in on this conversation too, and so we all voted, and go ahead.
Anesthesiologist was worried about the stroke.
He just didn't think I might recover.
Being so weak.
Yeah, so, or something, I don't know.
All right, but you did, and you had some amazing support from a lot of...
Well, Thomas and Cheryl, one of my sons and daughter-in-law, came over every single afternoon for I don't know how long, how many months that was. And they would make me get up off the sofa and walk. And I started out walking just a few steps at a time. We gradually got where we go 30 feet, and then 60 feet, and then back, and then out on the driveway to the one end, and they'd help me back. And then after a while, I could go out there and back. And then finally one night I said, "You want to try it around the street, around the corner?" And I said, okay. I had a walk at that time. Thomas on one side and Cheryl on the other. Can't tell you how tough that was, because I'd fall or want to fall every once in a while. But that's the reason I'm walking around today. I have no doubt about it, because you just got to get up and go.
They weren't going to let you stop.
They would not let me stop, and I'd get awful mad with them a lot of afternoons. I just don't want to walk.
Well, let me get the picture right. After you had your stroke at the lake, could you have gotten up out of a bed and walked to the bathroom?
No.
You could not have.
I was like a baby.
You were just
Yeah, I couldn't
totally
do anything.
bedridden.
I couldn't do anything. Gene stayed with me in the hospital 3 straight weeks, 24 hours a day. And I know the nurses would have looked after me somehow if she hadn't been there, but they looked after me good because she
But
was
you
on.
literally did not get out of that bed unless somebody lifted you.
That's right. That's the way it started. I don't remember how long that lasted, because before they let me leave the hospital, I did have to get up and struggle to